It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Binita Kamath. Dr. Kamath earned her medical degree from Cambridge University, UK in 1996. She completed her fellowship training in GI and hepatology at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, where she also completed a master's in translational research at the University of Pennsylvania. She is currently a staff physician in the Division of Gastroenterology and Hepatology at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto and an associate professor in the Department of Pediatrics at the University of Toronto. She is also an associate scientist in the Sick Kids Research Institute. She has collaborated with the CHOP Alagille Syndrome Group and has published on genotype-phenotype associations in Alagille syndrome. Her current work is focused on phenotypic manifestations of Alagille syndrome and understanding bile duct development in this disorder using stem cell technology. And we are honored to have her speak here today on navigating challenges in research as mid-level faculty. Welcome, Dr. Kamath.
So I'd like to thank NASPGHAN and Neera and Ben for the opportunity to speak today. So first of all, I am undoubtedly the least accomplished person that's going to stand at this podium today. But that's okay, because I also suit the requirements of the talk, because I'm mid-level, I'm challenged in this career, and I'm navigating. So I'm living what I'm going to talk to you about today. So that's how we go. So what I'm going to talk about today, first of all, I'm going to say, is there really a problem for mid-career faculty? There is, and then we'll talk about what the specific challenges are, and then talk about navigating and overcoming those challenges, really trying to make this practical. I want to give you some practical steps if I can, and then finally end with some personal perspectives. So first of all, let's just define what I'm talking about when I talk about mid-level faculty. I'm talking about late assistant to associate professor stage. It can last about 12 to 20 years of your professional career, and it's actually the longest phase of your career. And it starts usually at about year 7 onwards. But it's also the most productive phase. It's the time in which people teach the majority of their students. It's the time in which you produce the bulk of your papers. And it's when you will serve in expert and leadership roles. And also, mid-level faculty actually make up the biggest number of academic ranking faculty as well. So that it's the longest time and you're the biggest bulk of a department. Now, a national survey done a few years ago showed that actually on most measures, associate professors have the lowest job satisfaction. They feel that they rank last in mentoring opportunities and obtaining support to go to conferences. They rank last on satisfaction with their protected research time. They say that they were the least likely group to say that they were satisfied with their department, with their institution as a place to work, and they're least likely to say that they would even work at that place again. So all the senior people in the room are thinking, right, I'm going to go back and be nice to my associate professors. So what are the specific challenges that are faced? Well, obviously the big thing, the thing that Neera and I always are commiserating with each other about is research funding. And the biggest issues are that there's loss of eligibility for all those new investigator opportunities. We see it time and time again, and quite appropriately, there are so many opportunities for new investigators, but when you're no longer eligible, you think, it's a real challenge. You also have less credibility. You're now applying with the big fish, that's how I always feel, but you have less credibility because you have less publications, you have less grants, and so you feel less competitive. You have less experience on sitting on grant review boards, so you haven't had as many opportunities to read good grants. And as I said, you're competing in the same pool. The other challenge, I think, faced by mid-level faculty is this issue of mentoring. In general, or often, formal resources for formal mentoring are diverted to junior faculty. And there's this competing goal as a mid-level person of both you have your own personal need to continue to be mentored, but you also have to develop your skills to mentor. And there's this feeling of, if your institution is diverting these resources away, is it because they acknowledge that you're successful, or are they abandoning you? You have to try and get that balance. The other issue about when you're mid-level, this is also the time in your career when you're going to really start getting more and more opportunities. So are they opportunities or are they distractions? And this is something that as a mid-level person, you're really navigating and trying to get that balance right. And finally, there can be a feeling of stagnation when you get to mid-career, because you start off when you're junior and you're really excited and you've done really well. You've done your first 5 to 7 years of work in a particular field. But then what happens? You feel that you should be pressure? You should be focused, and focus is great, but can it become narrow and repetitive? And how are you going to diversify beyond that? So you take a big, deep breath. You're mid-career. The honeymoon's over. We're not going to dwell too much more on the challenges. We're going to dwell on how we're going to actually deal with them. So how are we going to overcome the challenges of funding? And I think this is about diversification. I think Dr. Winter went through some incredible opportunities, how you can diversify your source of funding. So that's the first thing. Think about diversification. And I don't need to go into too much of this because some of this has already been covered, but think about industry. Think about industry-derived protocols or even investigator-initiated protocols, as has been discussed. And this can lead to income generation. This can lead to clinical trial experience, which I think is really valuable. It can also lead to your first opportunities for leadership within a larger network. Look within your institutions, GCRCs, the CTSA rewards. I've benefited from these. These are also a tremendous opportunity. So think about diversifying your source of funding. Other options are philanthropy. So I think that there are incredible opportunities in this funding climate to think about philanthropy and reach out to your hospital foundation. Most of our hospitals have incredible foundations who will work with you. And you may be a priority area. Your work already may be a priority area for your foundation, which is wonderful. But if not, see if you can align yourself with one of their priorities. I'm not asking you to change your tack tremendously, but you can align yourself. Or you may be directly approached, or you can directly approach philanthropists as well. And I don't think there's any shame in doing this, and I really think it's a wonderful opportunity. And then finally, go to your institution and ask for bridge funding, or just accelerated funded if you feel that it's an important time in your career that you need a little injection of funding. So that would be my ideas about diversifying your sources. Think about industry, philanthropy, institution, and really, if all else fails, don't give up, don't stop doing academia. There's another option. We just move to another institution and get a second startup. And I have never asked Sahel this, but I'm wondering if he did get an extra injection of funds when he moved to Pittsburgh. I know I did when I made my move about 3 years ago. And it's to say, don't give up. It may just be that at that particular institution, it isn't the right time for them to give you that funding. The incumbent never gets extra money. But if you move somewhere else and you're filled with enthusiasm and great ideas, you can get an extra startup. So I think diversifying in terms of institutions can also be helpful. So other ways that you can diversify yourself to deal with challenges in research funding is think about diversifying your research area. So you have to keep thematic, we know that, but you can have mixed portfolios of content so that you can have some things that are basic science, some elements that are more translational. So think about that as well, because that will open up research opportunities. And then diversify your roles. I think the times when everything that you do, that you're going to be a single PI on a grant, those days are over, that we have to think about more varied opportunities to get funding. So you may be primary leadership in one or two major projects, but you can be a collaborative investigator that brings in some money, and you can I think that research consortia, as you've seen from the SOL that Dr. Levine showed in hepatology particularly, have been very great opportunities for as a site PI or a site investigator to get additional funds. So what about the challenges in mentorship? So mentorship for yourself. We all know mentorship needs to be acquired, managed, and maintained. So how we at my institution thought about maintaining mentorship for mid-level faculty? And my division chief instituted a scholarship oversight committee for mid-level faculty, which I think was an incredible strategy on her part. So this committee is made up of non-divisional members. There are formal meetings. I have to produce written reports just so that the mid-level person doesn't feel forgotten or abandoned. So I think, and this is an inexpensive step that can be taken in any division, just to form this for mid-level faculty. The other options are mid-career faculty programs. So they don't have to be specifically for mid-career, but most faculty development programs often will target mid-career people. In a systematic review of 10 studies on the implementation and evaluation of leadership programs for academic physicians a few years ago showed that leadership programs have a positive effect on participants' advancement, their likelihood of hospital leadership positions, and the number of publications produced as compared to mid-level faculty that did not participate in these programs. So if there is one at your institution that your chief needs to nominate you for, you need to ask, you need to be proactive and say, I want to be part of this. And there may be also some, perhaps not even in your institution, but in the area that you can participate in. becoming a mentor. So becoming a mentor, of course, as I said, you're balancing for the first time in mid-career, being a mentor and being mentored yourself. I think there's nothing wrong in getting mentorship in how to be a good mentor. I think that it's not self-fulfilling, it's actually really important. But as you start to take on mentors, I think the mid-career person really has to think about avoiding potential conflict and try to identify a related project that is thematic for your mentee but will not put you in direct competition within a few years, because there isn't a big gap between you and that mentee, and you just want to make sure that it's going to be productive for you but also helpful to them. And I think you should consider co-mentoring trainees. I think that that's a really great opportunity when you're starting out, because then you're learning from that other mentor, and it could also be the best possible environment for that mentee. So how about overcoming challenges? Are in terms of distractions? Are they distractions? Are there opportunities? And I think you have to balance up. When you become mid-career, the first time that you may get international or national prestige opportunities, and there will also be opportunities back at your own institution. You have to balance the two. I think you have to do what you're good at, but just make sure that whatever you do is recognized by your home institution, because you may think that something's really exciting outside the institution, but if your own promotion track doesn't think much of it, then it's not going to be helpful to you. But choose, be proactive. I don't think that opportunities fall in your lap. I think you go out and you find these opportunities and you talk to people and say, how do I get involved in that committee and how do I take on that challenge? And don't underestimate yourself, but also don't overestimate how much time you have. So my final challenge that I had talked about, that I wanted to think about how we can overcome, is this issue of stagnation. And I think that I said basic science, but I think many aspects of science can sometimes become narrow and repetitive. And I think it's fairly obvious, but one can consider translation of basic science, and if you're predominantly a clinical researcher, to think about mechanisms of your clinical disease that you're interested in, and that's really best done through collaboration. But there's a way that you can also think about rejuvenating yourself. When you've got to year 7, 8, 9, and you think, can I really do this again? How am I going to branch beyond? Think about time spent in another lab or institution. And I put mini sabbatical. That's not to make the division chief scared that you're going to go away for a year, but even a month or even a 3-week stint in another institution where you feel somebody's doing something exciting, that can just rejuvenate you and certainly get a collaboration going, but can just inspire you to overcome stagnation. So what doesn't kill you make you stronger? I hope everyone believes that. I thought I would now just tell you how I've done this, or I am doing this. I'm currently year 8, so I'm just mid-level, I guess, right now. And my profile is that I'm 60% research and 35% clinical. And I always think these percentages don't make a lot of sense until you know what that actually means. So in my institution, that means I do half a day of clinic a week, and I do 10 weeks on transplant service. So you may think that's more or less, but that's what I do. And the rest of my time I spend doing research. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I've overcome these challenges. And I feel challenged by funding probably more than any other aspect of this. So in the last couple of years, I'm just talking about funding in the last couple of years, I've applied for one federal grant, which was unsuccessful. But what I have then done was I diversified. I've applied for multiple grants from various sources. Each of them were between $25,000 and $50,000. I applied to the Sick Kids Transplant Center, the Sick Kids Research Institute, various foundations. I got an academic grant from philanthropy. I got a philanthropic grant, and I can tell you that in the last 2 years, that the multiple small grants has counted up to several $100,000. So I didn't get the federal grant, but I actually got more than I would have gotten the federal grant. It has been more work because I've been constantly writing grants, but I didn't give up. I just kept going, and that's been several $100,000. I'm site PI for an NIH-funded consortium, which also brings in resources. And when I got to Sick Kids, I got a second startup, and I still have used that money wisely. I've been at Sick Kids for 5 years, but I still have that. And then recently I went to my institution to ask for more money. I didn't have a problem with money, but I felt that a second postdoc in the lab would accelerate my work and make me more likely to get federal funding next year. And they agreed, and they just gave me extra money. So if I hadn't asked, I wouldn't have got it, and I think I just pitched a good case, and that was it. So you don't only have to go to your institution when you're in trouble and need bridge funding. You can go to an institution where you can say, everything's actually going really well, and I'm going to get that federal grant next year, but if you give me $100,000 today, I will definitely get that federal grant next year. So it's a strategy. It worked this time. It probably only worked once, though. How have I overcome the mentoring? I told you about the SOC committee that we have at Sick Kids, and so I have a formal mentorship committee, which I have found very valuable. But of course, I've also sought my own mentorship. I've maintained mentors from CHOP. I have mentorship actually from England, and I've sought my own mentorship at Sick Kids. And you have to do that, and I think we all know that. So I've had 4 mentees, apart from co-mentees, there are 4 mentees, all of whom I have co-mentored with people in the epidemiology program at Sick Kids, or with somebody who's a more pure basic scientist. So they've all been enrolled in graduate programs, which I thought was very helpful. And for those of you who know me, my background has been in Alagille syndrome. None of my mentees are studying Alagille syndrome because there really isn't enough space for 4 people in addition to me to have a career in Alagille syndrome, right? Because then there'd be more of us than there would be patients. So I have given them, I have given them all aligned projects that have undoubtedly helped me in my publication record, but they have been lined in biliary projects or liver-related projects. And my philosophy has been to give them projects that they can go and be independent with, but have also helped me along the way. So it's thematic for me, but not really directly in competition. And then how have I dealt with opportunities and distractions? Well, I've really enjoyed opportunities that I've had in NASPGHAN and AASLD, so I really like opportunities outside my institution. But then on the other hand, you also have to say no to things, and I recently decided not to pursue an opportunity to be fellowship program director at Sick Kids because I felt that I just wouldn't have the time, and I really enjoyed the things that I was doing outside the hospital. So choices. I had to make some choices, even though that was quite hard. So how have I dealt with stagnation? So I think Neera mentioned my projects earlier before I came to Sick Kids were largely to do with clinical, genetic, and phenotype studies of Alagille syndrome. And I went from a situation where, again, there's only so many clinical papers I can write about Alagille syndrome. How am I going to take that interest and move away from a situation where I could be stagnated? So I approached a senior investigator at Sick Kids. Sick Kids, Toronto, there's a big strength in stem cell biology, and we've started studies which which we are differentiating cholangiocytes from iPS cells. It's very different to anything that I've done before, but I really do feel rejuvenated. And in the research time that I have, I've immersed myself in his lab. And so I'm not doing the lab work, but I'm there a lot and I'm understanding what's going on. And it really helps me to write the grants and the papers that we need to get done. So I feel rejuvenated by having just stayed aligned, but retract myself. And the other thing that I've done is I've created something totally different to anything that I've ever done before, which is that we have a novel area of study which is looking at frailty, which is looking at patients who are awaiting liver transplant and how they have a non-biochemical abnormalities, so how they're weak and how that will impact their progress through transplantation. And to do that, we've built on the infrastructure of SPLIT, which, for people who don't know, is the studies in pediatric liver transplantation. And we actually have a multi-center study, which I'm the head of with Vicky Ng, where 17 centers are collecting data. And guess what? There was no grant for this. This has been done on goodwill. 17 centers across North America are sending us data, and we're putting it together. So I think that there are opportunities if you just have to be innovative. Finally, another opportunity that I was given at Sick Kids, which is great, which is that they've enrolled me in an executive leadership program at the Rotman School for Business, which is a great business school in Canada. And that's been another way to think about injecting new ways of thinking into my science. So it's been really exciting. So finally, I hope I've convinced you that, mid-career is a little bit scary. Not everyone's mid-career yet, but you all will be. But you can get over the funding issues if you think about diversification without losing your theme. So to diversify your source, your science, and yourself. Mentorship, get it, do it, and get help to do it well. For opportunities, grab them and create them, but just make sure you get credit for the work that you do. And then recreate and rejuvenate yourself so that you may have to recreate yourself multiple times in your career. I think about somebody like Ron Sokol, who's such a legend, and he has recreated, if you look at his publication record, he's recreated himself at multiple points in his career, and that's how I plan to do it. So will it be easy? Nope, but I think it's absolutely worth it. I hope that all the young people here will stay in academia and have not been scared off by what I've said. Thanks.